I hit the ground running right now with the session today. I have with me Michael Young, who'll be I'll be tag teaming with him throughout the whole session. So let's get this started, guys. So during today's webinar, we're going to be talking about some basics around threat intelligence. Apart from that, we'll talk about the current threat landscape and the current trends uh, in the cybersecurity space. We'll also talk about skill gaps by numbers and some figures which are there. And then towards the end, we'll talk about the best practices. And of course, we'll also talk briefly about the certification by EC Council, which is Certified Threat Intelligence Analyst. And towards the end, we'll have some questions and answers too. So since Meher had already done the introductions, I'll skip the slides which was introducing us. So I'll jump on about what is threat intelligence, and I won't spend much time on it. So in short, threat intelligence is just knowledge or information which helps individuals and organizations to make informed decisions around instant response or countering any kind of cyber incident. There is a detailed definition by Gartner also. I won't read through it, but in short, it talks about how that information is structured, it's not structured. But in short, threat intelligence is information which helps organizations in responding to various cyber threats and incidents. Moving further, what are the key elements or key parts or key of a threat intelligence? The first important thing is observables and IOCs, also known as indicators of compromise. So basically, observables comprise of individual pieces of information like file hashes, IP addresses, domain names, etc. And of course, IOCs are collections of observables that are usually associated with the compromise on an ongoing attack or a threat actor. Apart from that, in threat intelligence, there is an internal enrichment of information and external enrichment also. Internal enrichment pertains more to IP addresses and URLs from phishing emails which are submitted by internal organization or internal staff or perhaps an internal cybersecurity team. It also gets information about IP addresses from blocked or through an exfiltration attempt, or perhaps if there was a DDoS attack or some kind of an active or a passive activity, it's that information. Apart from that, in terms of external threat intelligence or external enrichment, this pertains to inbound threat intelligence from a trusted circle or from feeds from commercial or non-commercial sources. Like commercial sources could be vendors, could be like firewall vendors, like I mean, no, I don't want to name them, but all firewall vendors or a DDoS solution vendor. Whereas non-commercial feeds could be coming from uh, your state-based CSERTs or your ISACs, which are like information sharing and analysis centers. So in short, threat intelligence is a combination of internal and external sources which provide you more information about a current threat, which is or an ongoing threat or a threat which is about to materialize. So these are the key things which pertain to the elements of a threat intelligence. Now, why should we share threat intelligence? What's the need behind that? What's the driver behind that? Now, to start off with that, I think the first thing which you need to understand is that the bad guys share tools, tactics, and procedures. I mean, we all know that the dark web is full of information, full of tools, full of anything which pertains to exploiting a vulnerability, infiltrating a ransomware, or doing any malicious activity. And the bad guys work collaboratively. They share information through, and of course, the main source is the dark web, but there's lots of information available on the internet too. So if the bad guys can collaborate, why can't the good guys collaborate too and share information so that they can actively respond to threats in a timely manner? The second thing which we need to understand is that when an attack is actually successful, the bad guys use the same attack against similar targets because they have learned that, okay, that particular attack worked with one particular organization or a person. And since they were successful at that, they might have another victim who they can just to go after. Third thing is that there needs to be situational awareness for threats being investigated. So this is something which is very important. If there is any organization which is experiencing a threat or an incident, they should share that within a trusted circle or within, like for instance, I come from higher education space or the research and education space. We have a trusted circle of research and education institutions or higher education institutions which do share information about the threat. And of course, by sharing that information, you are able to prevent from any other organization within your trusted circle from falling victim to that particular threat or an incident. And of course, the other important part to understand if you are the first or last or the only one seeing this. So if you share that information within your trusted circle, you will know as to where you stand. Are you the only one experiencing it? Are you the first one experiencing it? And of course, if you are amongst many who are experiencing that particular incident or threat, there are other institutions or individuals within your circle who can help you remediate that specific threat or share any information which might help you address that threat on an incident. And of course, you can, once you share that information, or you will be able to get information about if that threat or attack is industry specific or it affects many stakeholders across other segments also. So you're able to get more information about that threat. So in short, what I always tell people is that threat intelligence is about sharing information which could help resolve any cyber an eventuality or any incident. So that's the crux of it. Moving forward, so based on some findings by the Pohnman Institute, it said that the average time to spot a breach or the mean time to identify is 201 days. And then the mean time to contain is 70 days. Now let that sink in. 201 days. Just imagine that the perpetrator has a good enough time, 200 days, to collect enough information about that organization which they have breached and do anything they want to. 200 days is enough to get information about PII, crown jewels, configurations, and everything you can think of. So that's quite alarming. That's quite alarming. And of course, mean time to contain is 70 days. That's a lot. I mean, the mean time to contain should be a lot more less than that. But these are the current trends based on the findings by the Pohlman Institute. Now, some other facts. 85% of the cases took a day or less, while 80% of organizations took weeks or months to detect. Now, average number of days hackers lurked on a network to steal data was 229 days. Just imagine. I mean, that's, as I said, that is enough to collect enough information and to uh, carry out other malicious activity. So these are some alarming facts which also substantiate as to why organizations actually need to go for cyber threat intelligence. So in short, it's all about the time to respond. Because at the end of the day, it's about the lack of speed and agility when responding to a suspected data breach. So the better your response time, the better are your chances of recovering from that incident or making sure that you're able to mitigate that in due time. And the tagline over here is immunity by community. If we are able to build that strong community which shares threat intelligence on a timely basis, we'll be able to immune ourselves or immune our organizations from such threats on an ongoing basis. So what we often say is that we need to make our people more effective. And of course, shared intelligence fills the gap, fills the skills gap also. Because in short, what is happening is that you're sharing information about threats which might be unknown. And of course, in a way, you're creating awareness also. So in short, what needs to happen is that whenever we talk about an approach in the technology or the security world, we talk about three main elements: people, process, and technology. Now, in threat intelligence, the process piece is about how to share the information, how to use structured information, how to use unstructured information. But at the end of the day, it's the people who are going to be acting on it or acting upon it. So by sharing threat intelligence, you're also educating people, creating awareness also, and making sure that the people are well equipped with all the required information to respond to a cyber threat, be it a high risk cyber threat, be it a low risk cyber threat, or be it a medium risk cyber threat. So let's talk about the threat intelligence sharing maturity model. Where does it start? How does it mature? And I mean, how does that whole model look like? So if level zero is not sharing anything. It's just like sitting on a time bomb, sharing nothing and just waiting for something to happen. That's zero. Level one is manually sharing. And the word is like ad hoc sharing. This could be through emails, through phones, or by having those mailing lists, by just letting the trusted community that you work with. As I mentioned, that I'm picking on the higher education community, that's because that's the community I work with. We have lots of mailing lists. We have got a security special interest group on which we share information. Then we have got a mailing list by the Canadian Center of Cybersecurity, which does also send out advisories to us based on the traffic light protocol. That's a bit more structured, but just wanted to give that as an example. The second maturity level is more about automated ingestion. Uh, this is more like getting automated threat feeds from commercial and non-commercial sources. Like in Canada, we've got the Canadian Center of Cybersecurity. We've got feeds coming from Can Cyber also. Then, of course, there are lots of vendors, for instance, lots of firewall vendors, lots of security vendors, which also provide for sticks and taxi server feeds and feeds which can be utilized by your security operations center folks and some other security tools also. And of course, this level three and more, level three is more about automated observable sharing. So this is about an active community engagement. Like I gave an example of the Canadian Center of Cybersecurity. It actually engages with the community on an automated basis, also on an active basis. So they stand at that level. And of course, level four is community based defense. Like once you have developed that mature model of sharing threat intelligence and of course structuring that threat intelligence and using automated and non-automated sources, then you're able to use that in a security operations center or a CSERT in which we have analysts, you've got incident response people, you've got DevOps people who are actually utilizing that threat intelligence information to thwart attacks or to be proactively prepared for any cybersecurity eventuality or incident. So that's how this model looks like. Okay, moving forward. So we spoke about the whole maturity model. Now, what you should share, I mean, we're talking about threat intelligence, what are the things that should be shared with the community? So, some of the compelling reasons why you should be sharing it. The first one is what is the time to detect? Second one, time to remediate. And of course, good data enables good decisions. And I think this is something which is really key to know, understand over here because the data which is being shared as part of threat intelligence should be good enough, should not have any information which is irrelevant. And of course, timely data enables timely decisions. And of course, threat intelligence is all about timeliness. And of course, fresh data specific to your industry. So make sure that if you are sharing any information or you're getting any information that is specific to you and specific to your industry. And of course, Make sure that if you are investigating an active breach, and if you are sharing that information about that breach with your community, minus all the confidential information, make sure that you make that a part of your investigation report also. And of course, please do not hesitate to share information about observables and indicators of compromises, because observables and IOCs are specific pieces of information which would enable the others to identify that specific cybersecurity incident and take action against it. And of course, it's also really important to share the context of why are you sharing that information and what are you looking for. Because at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the information that you are sharing is properly structured or is identifying the right information. That's what's important. And make sure that you identify what you're looking for also. Because remember, you don't have much time to respond to cybersecurity incidents. So make sure that the information that you're sharing is informative enough. And one of the terms which are often used is that threat intelligence should be tactable and should be actionable. If it's not any of the both, it's of no use to anybody. So remember, tactical and actionable is the right word. Okay, so I would like to hand it over to Michael Leung now, who will talk about the current threats in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Farouk. I guess what you can do is just you can manage the slides on your end.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking about the current trends and the threat landscape as it relates to cybersecurity. So there's a report that gets put out every year by an organization called ISACA. ISACA is a membership-based organization, global in nature, and they consist of cybersecurity professionals, IT risk, governance, and management professionals, governance. So this is an interesting report that comes out every year. And every year, as it relates to cybersecurity in terms of the skills gap, we're seeing these numbers not change. So it's kind of alarming in that basically, as you can see, that 69% say their cybersecurity teams are understaffed. 58 say that they have unfilled open security positions, and I think you can qualify this by just doing a job search and for cybersecurity openings. The other part, and I've experienced this myself, being a previous security professional trying to hire staff, it takes up to 30 or 32% say it takes 6 months or more. In my case, it almost took close to a year to find the right people that I was looking for. And then as you can see, it's been ticking up every year. So this is up 6 points from last year. So this was the 2019 and so forth. I have some other stats as well, and I don't have a slide for it, but I'll just talk to it. So cybersecurity and IT are considered your front line, your first line of defense, as it were. Also, I have information from the Institute of Internal Auditors. I know we have a global audience, but they put out a report on the North American, what they call the North American Pulse of Internal Audit. And what this is a report that they provide the chief auditors to articulate to the boards about the key risk areas, as well as some stats. So no surprise, the top cybersecurity, the top threats are cybersecurity and data protection. And some of the stats that sort of relate to this is that from their perspective, they say that more than half of them, 51%, say that they have their internal audit team lack cybersecurity expertise on staff to actually audit cybersecurity. So what that means is there's a greater reliance on the first line of defense. So meaning that the threat intelligence, the people on the front lines looking at cybersecurity threats, there's a greater need for that. Because not only is there skills gaps on the first line, but all the way up to the internal audit side, which is considered your third line of defense, is that they're experiencing a lot of challenges as well. And traditionally, they're not really in IT or don't have a technical background. Another stat that they provide as well is that they say that 30% of a gap between actual and desired assurance. So meaning they have an audit plan to audit their cybersecurity practices over readiness and response. There's 36% say that, well, we would like to do it, but we don't have the capability and capacity and the skill set. So again, a greater reliance on the first line of defense for cybersecurity professionals on that. On the budget side, on a good note, we've over the last few years we've seen an increase, but it's still at 55%. And now what we've actually saw is a bit of a dip now. So although that there's still a desired increase in cybersecurity budgets, the trend has been, or at least for last year, has been down 9 points. So now you're challenged with a little bit of relying on tools and people to address that. So that's a little bit interesting stat. We'll see where it goes next year, but I think the trend is overall is that there's going to be a need to spend more time and effort in regards to this space. It's just basically a cost of business. Another stat on the 34% of security pros basically have a high degree of confidence in their ability of their teams. So not a high percentage there. So again, there is a greater level of confidence that's needed for them. And part of that is having skilled a workforce to work and deal with cybersecurity threats. Farouk, can you move to the next slide? Great, thank you. So this is actually part of the same study, but what it's asking is that in terms of your organization in maintaining or contracting out the intelligence capability for your cybersecurity threats awareness, how many of you maintain this in-house? So you can see it's not too bad, it's 40%, as well as 25%. So basically 65% utilize threat intelligence. And what you're seeing here on the third one is 11% saying that they don't have cybersecurity intelligence capabilities or awareness, and another alarming 12% really don't know, which is, I would probably maybe categorize it with the 23% there. So there's obviously room for growth in terms of having some capabilities. So you're going to see that probably trend moving towards both either in-house and or externally outsourcing that capability. Okay, great. Great. So with that, we move to the next slide. Thanks, Farouk. So what this slide is really talking about, it may be hard to see, but it's a growing threat landscape. And what that means is that there's a lot of things going on in the world today. We have a lot of IoT, and with that, is the smart home sensors, smart fridges, anything that you can plug into the internet. And with that, there's a lot of things that could be compromised because typically a lot of the IoTs don't have a lot of security built in and a proliferation of that. Some of the other things to note is that it takes relatively short timeline in terms of once a new attack vector has been discovered to actually weaponizing that. So meaning taking over that IoT device or that device and exploiting that in terms of making it under their control. Interesting stat here in terms of the bad actors identifying the distributed denial of service attacks. So over the last few years, or I would say maybe 5-10 years, well, yeah, about 5 years ago, DDoS was quite big in terms of hearing it on the news and so forth. It still is. Last year, it took a bit of a dip. But as you can see in the first half of 2019, it actually grew by 39%. And I think what we're seeing and why that is this proliferation of DDoS as a service. So being able to quickly leverage a service to perform DDoS attacks. And it's usually within this sweet spot of the volumetric capability of these services that are able to provide these types of attacks. The other thing that you can see probably in the news is all the political aspects that are going on, everything from the votes, compromising the voting system, social engineering, and misinformation. I think that's the key one. I heard through another conference that actually happened in New York for all risk professionals. So obviously cybersecurity became a topic of discussion in terms of where that is. Someone made the statement that cybersecurity is no longer the #1 threat, and they say that misinformation is. So that could be argued, but his argument was that basically cybersecurity, we know the threats, we just have to get it done. But I guess my argument was that we're not getting it done in terms of, yes, we know we need to do this, we need to have trained professionals, we need to have these security programs in place, but the challenge is it's not getting done, or at least to the level that we would like to have it. Another alarming figure here, we talked about IoT devices, and the argument was basically, oh, that's fine, I had all these devices, but it's behind a firewall. But what we're seeing is also proof of concept malware getting out there that actually can exfiltrate or actually compromise IoT devices behind the firewall. And this is actually an alarming figure. And actually, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, is that they say that an average of 7.7 million IoT devices are connected to the internet every day with little or no security. So that is an interesting stat, and this was put out by the NetScout Threat Intelligence report. But if you can imagine, there are a lot of IoT devices that are being put on the internet every day. And with that, it just adds to the botnets that can be utilized and basically being compromised. I used to work in the financial services industry, and the point of sale was one thing that we saw as an interesting attack target. So we saw this coming, meaning that in North America or in Canada, we actually moved to what we call chip and pin for the credit cards and debit cards. And with that, it would look to protect those cards if one was able to acquire the pin. However, we saw a trend in the UK, meaning once they went to chip and pin, as they went to chip and pin earlier than we did in Canada, is that a spike in malware and malicious activity had transpired. So meaning making it difficult for the bad guys were able to catch on and find another way of doing it. And this is what you're seeing as well. Okay, so with that, there's another report I have. I don't have that in the slides here, but this came out from IBM and Ponyman as well. And because they've been doing these studies for a number of years, and with the data that they have collected, as well as understanding the current trends, they are actually able to predict the probability of a data breach in the next 2 years. And they say, and it's been trending ever since they have a chart that lists it from 2014 to 2019 over the past 5 years, and it's been slowly ticking up. And as according to them, in 2019, basically this year, is that within 30% is more of a probability of a data breach happening in the next 2 years, just based upon what's growing in the current threat landscape, as well as where we are in terms of handling and managing breaches and detecting them. Okay. Farouk, can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So it's been 2 years, I believe, of this week since the Equifax data breach. And as you can see, where are they today? And you can see the stock price drop. And this is another supporting information towards this from IBM as well, is that once you have a breach, the impact lasts for years. According to them, and they have some interesting stats on that, but basically 2/3 of the cost of a breach occur in the first year. So that means that 1/3 of the cost of a breach happens after that year. And as you can see with Equifax, it's still going on in regards to where they are in terms of their stock prices and so forth. And what's more interesting is that in a more highly regulated environment, that cost is a lot more in terms of that. And in terms of the IBM report as well, is that they average a cost of a data breach from all countries, everything from the US down to the UK and other countries that they track as well. They average a cost of $150 US cost per record. And as we're talking a little bit about Canada, Canada ranks 4th in terms of the total cost. And we come out at $187 US cost per record. So Canada ranks 4th in the cost of a data breach, but ranks third in the cost per record and relatively high in secondary indirect costs. So that meaning the amount of time and effort that an organization has resource allocated to a data breach resolution. So that's how Canada sort of relates in regards to the overall breach side. Farouk, can you move to the next slide? Ransomware. So you probably have heard this quite a bit in the news. It was quite popular a couple of years ago when it started to come out, and it did take a bit of a dip. But this year, it's just been exploding as it relates to ransomware, and a lot of cities have been affected quite greatly. And the decision is basically, do we pay or don't we pay? It's a dilemma. And interesting fact here is that this was just published not too long ago, is that a claim is that insurance companies are actually feeling this rise in ransomware attacks. And what that is that it actually is cheaper for the insurer to pay than it is for an organization to address this, because some organizations are not able to restore from backup, and or they don't have backups. So that's an interesting argument. However, on the flip side, a couple of years ago, a couple of companies, an organization that owns and manages Oreo cookies, Ritz, Cadbury, as well as a pharmaceutical company, actually sued the insurers as it related to ransomware in the courts, and it's still in the courts because the insurers actually refuse to pay them, because typically when you do have a cybersecurity insurance, there's an extortion inclusion. So meaning if this is maybe considered extortion, so with that, a company saying, well, it's cheaper to pay because we have this covered already. However, in the insurance, there's actually an acts of war exclusion. So meaning that those companies that had a huge attack and it was affiliated to a potential Russian attack, and they cited it as a hostile or warlike action or acts of war, and they refused to pay. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. But at the end of the day, this threat is clear and present and happening today. Okay. Next slide. So with that, as you can see, this market, in terms of the threat intelligence market, is getting big. It's getting huge. And here's a couple of snapshots of where that's going in terms of its worth and expected growth. And then on the next slide. So these are just headline shots of where a lot of these professionals are continuing to grow. And as you can see, there's a more of a demand, not only in this market, but the need for more professionals in this space. Next slide. So what you're also seeing are major threat intelligence implementations or adoption by large companies here. As you can see, Microsoft, Verizon, really building up their capabilities in this area. Next slide. Here's a few other ones. Fujitsu, Visa, Deloitte, Wipro, so forth. And I think you guys can do this as well. Just do a quick Google search, Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst jobs. Oh, in the next slide. Yeah. Do a quick Google search and you'll get a bunch of results, alarming results, as well as going on to career sites. So if you can go to the next slide, Brooke. Just do it yourself and you can see that there are a lot more postings and positions that are needed in this area. Again, the first line of defense, one area that most organizations definitely need to focus on. Okay, and next slide, and yeah. And that's it. And with that, Farouk, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks a lot. So I think there's a better understanding of why this world needs more cyber threat intelligence professional. And I think in the past 25 to 30 minutes, I think we gained a better understanding of that. So, what are the best practices in this area, and what could be done in order to make sure that we are prepared in a better way to respond to cyber threats? I think the starting point is that organizations need to train and certify their cyber incident response team members in the area of cyber threat intelligence. That's the first starting point. The second point is that organizations, be it public sector or be it private sector, need to have co-op programs or internship programs in which they train and mentor upcoming cybersecurity talent. Because we need to start from ground up aware. I mean, there are existing teams and existing professionals in the area of cybersecurity who need to brush up their skills and get certified, but we also need to groom the talent for tomorrow. The people who are going to be graduating from universities and colleges soon and who are looking who are enrolled into co-op programs. So organizations need to come up with co-op programs in which are more structured and geared up towards making sure that these uh, future graduates are given the opportunity of getting the training and of course and being a part of a mentorship program also. Third one, which is probably one of the most important ones, is collaboration and engagement with appropriate third parties and developing a culture for threat intelligence sharing. And that's something which organizations need to do. So, I mean, I'll pick on Canada again and the research and education space. I mean, in Canada, especially in higher education, we share a lot, we collaborate a lot, be it anything, be it information about cyber threats, be it a job description, or be it any ideas. There needs to be more collaboration within sectors and across various sectors also. So it should not just be limited to public sector or a specific sector, be it higher education. This should be collaboration between public and private sector. So we need to have more collaboration, we need to have more engagement, we need to have more participation by the state governments or the provincial governments, and of course at the national level also. And of course, in Canada, we have got the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity, which is doing a pretty good job in making sure that threat intelligence is shared with the right people and with all the right stakeholders, and they are able to provide the right information also. And of course, being a security professional and coming from an audit and compliance background, one of the things which I always emphasize on is governance. So we need to develop a strong governance around the whole threat intelligence framework in organizations and beyond organizations. Because if you have proper governance in place, you'll have proper oversight in place, and you'll be able to sustain the model in a better way. And of course, lastly, what has to be done and what should be done on an ongoing basis is awareness and training at all levels within the organization, because that will be the key to the success around having an effective cybersecurity instant response program. Because we'll train the cyber incident response people. We'll probably have threat intelligence certified people in the organization also. But all the stakeholders in the organizations do get affected by a cybersecurity incident. I've yet to come across anybody in an organization who does not get affected by a cybersecurity incident when it happens. So we need to ensure that all the relevant stakeholders in our organizations do understand the importance of this and do understand that, okay, how is the organization able to improve its cybersecurity posture by making sure that the people do understand the importance of cyber threat intelligence and how it can help them remediate cyber incidents or perhaps be prepared for the next big cybersecurity incident. So these are some of the best practices which I wanted to shed light on, which organizations can adopt in order to have a more stable cybersecurity posture and making sure that the relevant people are trained and certified for it. So with that, I would like to talk about the certified threat intelligence analyst program being offered by EC Council. This program was launched in the last quarter of 2018 last year, and this has been uh, structured in such a way that the threat intelligence expert of tomorrow have the right tools and have the right knowledge to be able to respond to cyber threats in place. So let's talk about what this program is all about and what's so cool about it. I mean, what sets it apart? So I think we all spoke about the key issues affecting the cybersecurity space. We spoke about the current threat landscape. The current threat landscape is evolving on a regular basis. We hear about ransomware breaches and cybersecurity incidents on a regular basis. So that all of that space is evolving. And of course, for the CTI professionals, I think the program is structured in such a way that it enables them to understand that the threat landscape is evolving. The second thing is that this program covers all the basics about threat intelligence. It talks about the importance of threat intelligence in risk management, security operations center, and tools which relate to a security operations center. It also talks about various types of cyber threat actors, be it state actors, non-state actors. What are the goals? What are the motivations? It talks about that too. This program also sheds light on the different types of data feeds and sources. As I mentioned before, commercial and non-commercial feeds, how those threat feeds are structured and how can they be used. It talks about that. It talks about various steps. So it talks about the process piece. So it talks about the technology piece. It talks about the process piece. Okay, what's required in the requirements and planning and direction and review, and what can be done while you're utilizing, or what process you need to adopt when you are interpreting a threat intelligence feed and using that to your organization's advantage. It also sheds lights on the cyber kill chain methodology, talks about, as I said, the open source intelligence aspect, the human intelligence, IOCs, and of course, the various elements of threat intelligence, which I spoke about in my conversation earlier today. Of course, it also talks about data processing of structured and non-structured data. So in short, this program covers all the key elements of threat intelligence and how threat intelligence can be utilized. So going ahead, I mean, it talks about the whole process, talks about data analysis, how you can create more effective threat intelligence report, how you can disseminate it, and of course sharing it through various platforms. As I said, it lays lots of information around the process and of course the technology piece, and of course the various sources of threat intelligence and how it can be utilized in a more effective manner. So in short, what are the unique selling points of the certified threat intelligence analyst program? So I think first and foremost, it is a highly essential program or a must-have for those who deal with cyber threats and incidents on a regular basis. This could be people in your security operations team, in your network operations team, in your IT service desk, in your IT help desk. So anybody who deals with cybersecurity incidents, or as Michael Yang mentioned, be the first line or second line of defense. Sorry about the background noise. Those are the perks of working in downtown Toronto. Anyways, apart from this, since this is a certification program, it is compliant with the NICE framework. So it's based on that, and the course is built in accordance with the rigorous job task analysis. And of course, for all of you who are familiar with the NICE framework, it's primarily based on the job needs of cybersecurity professionals. And of course, uh, the most important part is that this program has been developed by subject matter experts from all over the world and from all the industries. This is something which I can vouch for because I'm also a part of the advisory council for CTIA in North America. So I do get to interact with all the SMEs who have been involved in it. So I can vouch for that, that this is something which is not just academic or in nature. It is developed by people who are experts and bring in lots of uh, experience and knowledge in this area. Apart from other features, I think this program is so comprehensive that it enables the individual who goes for this to effectively detect and respond and defeat any cybersecurity incident because they have the right knowledge and tools for that. It has a holistic approach, so it covers all the aspects of a threat intelligence program. So anything from planning, being proactive, execution, interpreting, and sharing it with other people. It covers all those aspects. And of course, uh, based on the statistics which Michael Yang provided in terms of the current threat landscape and the jobs out there, I mean, there are about 13 million jobs out there. And of course, there would be more jobs available in the area of cyber threat intelligence or security incident response or security operations center who are in dire need for such individuals. So people who go for this program will have a pretty good chance of getting employed uh, in cybersecurity team of various organizations. So, in short, what makes CTIA a unique credential? Uh, First of all, the program is based on the best threat intelligence report writing techniques. The second one, which really impressed me the most, was that it's hands-on. So 40% of the training program is completely hands-on, emphasizing on the learning objective. And of course, it provides the students with the largest library of tools and platforms and frameworks in the market. So that substantiates that this is a certification program which is hands-on and of course focuses on the right pieces of cyber threat intelligence.